Renee is back at the archive today, Renee Fleury. And today, unlike last time when we talked about professional poisoners, we are going to talk about murderous poisoners that were indefinitely serial killers or trained assassins, different kind of trained assassin. Um, what certain poisonous plants meant in the Victorian period and something to do with potentially poisoning an entire town with chocolate. As I eat chocolate, most of which is leftover Christmas candy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me back, Garrett. It is a pleasure. I am also known as Madame Datura. Oh, that looks delightful. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, that must have been the one of the boxes or bags that I sent you. Totally not poisoned. Not at all. I mean, it was just a bad batch, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can
Must have
totally say
been.
that it just reached its expiration date.
Well, somebody will be reaching their expiration date by the end of this.
Okay, so um
That's why I laugh hysterically.
well, that's what we're all about. Laughing through history. Um
Yeah.
so we'll get started on talking about Uh, so we were talking about some interesting professional poisoners, like King Louis's personal poisoner last time, and
Yep.
you mentioned a little bit about some poisoners over in a country known as India, which has a pretty interesting history. I hope one day to cover more in depth on. And yeah, so let's crack this one wide open. Talk about serial killers.
Just in time for Valentine's Day. For anybody who doesn't know, um, yes, my name is Renee Fleury. I also go by Madame Datura. Um, and I do this whole program called The Druid's Deadly Darlings, where I talk about poisonous plants and adjacent subjects, such as serial killers and anything poison and poison adjacent. So today we are talking about the serial killers, and there's two in particular who I will talk about. I'm not gonna go into like a whole bunch of them like I did the last time. Um, but I'm focusing on two because we are talking about chocolates and the season of love and what have you. And
Yeah, so what does one do when you're a professional poisoner and it's Valentine's or Valentine's related?
well, um, well, if you're the jealous type, such as in the case of Christiana Edmonds, you send your ex-lover a you send his wife anyway a box of strychnine laced chocolates, and then to avoid suspicion, to make it untraceable back to you, you then continue to buy boxes of said chocolates and return them to the shop after you've laced them all with strychnine. That's what one does when you're a serial killer and professional poisoner, and it's Valentine's Day. Um, so this was a real case in the 1870s, and it took place it was in Brighton in England. It was this little seaside town, and it made the headlines because of the elaborate nature of like, of this entire crime. Uh, so this woman, Christiana Edmonds, she was, I believe she was 43. First, they thought she was like 35. She was 43. She was pretty. She was quiet, reserved, and said to be a nervous type person. Certainly not somebody you would think of, I guess, when you think of what a poisoner, a femme fatale would be, which uh, is interesting in that we have a trope and an idea of, in our minds. It seems to come up whenever you think of a professional poisoner or a woman serial killer. And the trope for women is certainly poison. And we went into that a little bit in the last interview. Um, but this woman, she was like this quiet, bookish type lady. And at that time, uh, uh, truffles and chocolate creams were especially popular. In the Victorian age is when they took off because they found a way to, chocolate used to be a drink. We still have drinking chocolate. I have some with ashwagandha in it, actually, in my kitchen. Um, which, if you don't know, ashwagandha is good for reducing anxiety. It's not poisonous. So it's non poisonous herbal laced chocolate. But during the Victorian age, chocolate in a solid form became a popular confection, especially chocolate creams.
Yeah.
And that's what Christiana Edmonds used
Yeah,
to do her.
in this time period too, we covered this last year. I can leave the link in the video or in the description, but this is also part of the Industrial Revolution, and particularly in America, because us Americans love fads better than anyone else. America. We we made Valentine's a very interesting fad. So get out there. There was even newspapers advertising Valentine's parties. You can go ahead, you can get more easily accessibly made chocolate, and you can dress up and you can go meet some singles, some bachelors and some bachelorettes.
So yeah, and I mean today, oh, we have no shortage of chocolates and all sorts of stuff that can be found around Valentine's Day and single and ready to mingle parties. And yeah, that during the Victorian age is really when that fad kind of started. Um, a lot of fads started in the Victorian age. And what's interesting about Christiana Edmonds' case is that this was like a turning point for the media, in that it illustrates this case illustrates the development of the media as a cultural intermediary, and the popularity of a good murder. That's what it would. It's what fed into the coverage of sensationalist crimes in newspapers thereafter. And shortly thereafter, there was another woman named Cordelia Botkin who killed in an identical fashion in America. But we'll talk about her in a little bit. Uh, so she was known as the Christiana Edmonds was known as the Chocolate Cream Killer. That is her official title. She was born October 3rd, 1828, and died on September 19th of 1907 in the asylum where she was sentenced to. And she poisoned her entire town of Brighton in the UK with strychnine laced chocolates. She'd buy them from the local confectioner, John Maynard, and she'd lace them by injecting them with strychnine, which comes from the Nux vomica plant, which is native to India and Southeast Asia. And then what she would do was she would return these boxes of poisoned chocolates back to John Maynard's shop, and he was the local chocolatier and Candyman, and not that kind of Candyman. He literally was making candies and sweets, and
I'm
then
pretty
like
sure he was also some quality man candy as well.
oh, probably there was probably a lot of that going on. Like, hey, Candyman, hook me up with some sugar. He was the town sugar daddy. Look, I can't speak for his personal life. All I know is what befell this poor man. I don't think anything actually happened to him because they realized it wasn't him doing it. But I'm sure he was certainly investigated through no fault of his own. Um, he was just out there selling candy, and this woman was buying boxes of his candies poisoning them and then returning them back, and then he would resell them. And so the entire town got poisoned. Many people got ill. It resulted in the death of one person, a little 4-year-old boy named Sidney, who died in agony because botanical poisoning is not pretty. It's violent. Strychnine, in particular, is pretty awful, and they're all pretty bad. And it's really sad because he was a little 4-year-old boy, just enjoying his chocolates. And I'm sure his parents were like, it was, here you go, and then he died. It's horrible. But like, she didn't care. This woman was a serial killer. She was indiscriminate, and it all began because she'd had an affair with the town doctor, Dr. Beard. That was literally his name, Dr. Beard. I don't know if he had a beard. Um, and so, like, eventually he got tired of, like, it ended. I guess he got tired of her. And, this is all why she was living with her mother, by the way. Uh,
So she was living at home with mom, not much going for her, trying to
yeah,
get something out of a married man who's a doctor.
yeah. And, probably having a midlife crisis because she was probably around 30-ish, mid 30s when it began. And then he got tired of her and left and went back to his wife, Mrs. Beard, and she kept writing him like all these like love letters, and he was like, stop. He even wrote her like a cease and desist letter, and she wouldn't. So after he wrote back to her like, stop, we're done, she was like, all right, well then I'll just get your wife out of the picture since clearly you're choosing her over me. And that's when she sent Mrs. Beard a chocolate cream or a box of chocolate creams. I'm not sure if it was one or many. And she got ill. She fell ill, but she didn't die. She recovered. And the good doctor suspected it was Christiana Edmonds, his former crazy bitch lover, but he had no proof. And he didn't want to invite scandal since he did have an affair with this woman. I have no idea if his wife knew. I don't know. She knew by the end of it because it was all over the place in the newspapers. The illicit affair included. And she poisoned the entire town, which did result in the death, tragically, of a little 4-year-old boy. Um, Everybody else seems to have recovered, though. It's a shame it was a kid that died, if anybody. Yeah. So, um, like, besides that, like, her poisonings were really indiscriminate. And what she took to doing, because buying the boxes of chocolates, poisoning them, and returning them wasn't enough. She had, like, bags of them, basically. I don't know if she was, like,
Go around handing
in,
them out like, here, have some chocolate.
or she would, like, put them in, John Maynard's shop, the chocolate guy's shop, and just, like, leave them there and, like, have him, like, resell these. Or probably just like handed them out, like, here you go. But I think it was originally, it was some, I don't know if it was like a boy who was distributing the chocolates, or if that's the same. Some of the details are a little bit unclear, but anyway, she was, um, yeah, she was eventually found out, and she certainly broke the mold of what at least then they thought a traditional murderess should be, being pretty and well educated and well off and all of that. Like, she was a well educated woman. It wasn't like she was stupid. She was just a murderess.
Well,
She's
you
a
gotta
serial
have
killer.
half a brain to think of how you're gonna poison chocolate and
And
then
yeah, this was
distribute.
kind of a brilliant, elaborate scheme. To get the heat off of herself and just make it look like it was the chocolatier who was doing it. It was like really well thought out.
Yeah,
I have to say, like, it was kind of brilliant. It was frightening and how brilliant it was and how easy it is to do. Um, I'd like to point out that, as Madame de Tora, uh, in so taking on this persona and researching the topics that I do, I have realized just how easy it is to poison someone. And I don't recommend it. Please don't take that as an invitation to go out and learn how to undo your enemies or yourself. Don't do that. But it is frighteningly easy. And this is a perfect example of that. And so is the next one. Also, making chocolate at home is really easy. It is. I mean, there's a lot of help. You're going to make it from scratch, like from the cocoa bean pod. Though, like that gets a little bit pricey and it takes a while, but you can do it. It's not like you need any special equipment. You need like a food
You're
processor
saying
or
that
something.
chocolate's going up in price.
Yeah, just but also a cocoa bean pod is like $50, so it probably takes a while to get here. Snail
Yeah.
mail and all that. But it's frighteningly easy. And it makes me wonder now, anytime I'm like buying a box of chocolates, I'm like, is this poison? And it's like from the store, which is exactly what she did. It was right from the manufacturer. So I'm like, it probably isn't. But how many times have we seen cases of poison pet food? Like, terrifying. And nothing has changed in all this time.
Clearly, nothing at all. Nothing has
Yeah,
changed.
no.
2025. We're still just poisoning people.
And our food is poison too, but that's again a whole other story. We're not getting into that. But so was the poison. So was the food during the Victorian age. They were also dipping meat in arsenic and thought that that was fine to consume. And there was formaldehyde in milk and bread. Um, so again, nothing's changed. Um, but yeah, so her case was remembered in a notice of her death in 1970. She died in an asylum. As she was one of the most notorious criminal cases of the past century. And she was noted as being revealed a curiously cunning and subtle attempt at wholesale poisoning. Wholesale poisoning. Remember that phrase next time you go to Costco. Anyway, her case can, again, it illustrates the development of the media as this cultural intermediary, right? And sensationalist news stories. And her, like, she filled like lengthy columns in the newspapers, followed by like, oh, woman murders her friend by bludgeoning her to death. And that was like a little tiny column versus like it was like a blurb compared to the stories that continuously ran, probably for weeks while this trial was going on. And of course, the scandal with the doctor. Who doesn't like that? But certainly, then her crimes inspired art. The fine art of poisoning begets, more traditional arts. Art begets art. And her crimes were adapted into a 1970 TV drama where Christiana Edmonds was characterized as a young woman whose talent for poisoning people made the average bourgeois, by comparison, seem like the proprietor of a health food store or chocolate shop, as it was. And it was an oddly elaborate crime. I'll give her that. And it is really seemingly something out of a murder mystery because it predated the murder mysteries that it inspired, well, which are none other than Agatha Christie's Peril at End House, and she had poisoned chocolates in that story. Anyone who's a Christie fan, and Anthony Berkeley's 1929 novel, The Poisoned Chocolates Case. And she's the whole reason behind this trope. I know poisoned chocolates, it's not like the most popular trope, but it's certainly been used again and again. Um, and the twists and the turns of her case, they the scandalous case kept the newspapers abuzz for quite a while. Um, and it was so indiscriminate too. She just didn't care who lived and died. Like the one woman she wanted to poison because she was jealous didn't die, and she was like, "Oh, then I'll just poison everyone." I don't know.
WTF.
Yeah. So she was a true serial killer. Um, Sometimes when I talk about these femme fatales, I do like to humanize them, and I say many of these women poisoned during times of oppression when they didn't have a choice. It was a way of them obtaining their freedom, right, in some capacity from an abusive husband during times when they couldn't say anything and couldn't get divorced. Um,
Couldn't open a bank account.
yeah, it was a means to an end, to a better life for some of them. And some of the ones prescribing the poison were the vigilantes of their day. They got tired of seeing their clients, who I'm sure became some of their friends after a while. Um, they got sick of seeing them come in with bruises, right? Like Julia Tafana prescribing the cure instead of the treatment. We're not talking about those people. And, that to me is a gray area. This, I'm like, she was a serial killer. This lady was batshit crazy. Um,
She looks like a serial killer too.
Oh, but the next one really looks like a serial killer. Like, really, I feel like Kathy Bates should play this woman in the next one, Cordelia Botkin. Yeah. The other one I want to talk about, who was like around the same time, a little bit after, it was in 1898 that she committed this crime. She was born in 1854 and died on March 7th, 1910. She was born in Missouri, and Death by Chocolate is her title. The first U.S. murder in the mail that we know of. There were probably others, but we can't confirm them or know about them. So, first confirmed murder by mail. Um, and she was the first person that we know of to combine chocolate and arsenic, and the first to use the U.S. Postal Service as a murder device. It's a plot device, as you will. She lived in San Francisco, but she wanted to murder her lover's ex-wife or his wife. I'm not sure if he was her his ex-wife or his wife, but they weren't together in any case. And she lived all the way in Delaware. So it's like the perfect example of I really want to kill that person, but they're way over there. Like the invention of archery.
Nice.
I want to get that guy, but he's way over there. Except this was across the country, so bow and arrow wouldn't do it. So, but the postal service sure did the trick. Um, she, I believe, she made these chocolates, and the poison was in the filling. Again, I think they were chocolate creams. Um, but whatever, doesn't matter really what kind of chocolate it was. Um, she had an affair, another one having an affair with John Presley Dunning. He was a gifted writer and journalist with a penchant for infidelity and gambling. He may have been a brilliant journalist, but probably wasn't a nice guy. But they had an affair, and she was afraid that after his coverage of the Spanish American War, that he would go like return to his wife or ex-wife Mary in Delaware instead of returning to her. So what Cordelia did, because she was an evil bitch, she sent poison penmanship. She wrote plenty of letters to Mary Dunning saying that her husband was having an affair with a pretty English woman. And then when I guess that didn't do the trick, I don't, or maybe she just didn't care. She just really wanted the job done right. She finally sends her a box of chocolates laced with arsenic. Uh, and well, she died. Yeah, Mary did die. Um, and
I can see
Mary
that. Arsenic tends to do the job.
usually, yeah. But it's not one and done unless it's a high quantity. But when the chocolates, 3 pieces of chocolate were examined, um, and they were between 3 pieces out of the lot, they were found to contain enough arsenic to kill 4 people. Um, so there was a lot. it did the job and it did it well the first time. Um, but typically, in the case of arsenic poisoning, a little thing about it, in case you don't know, so arsenic usually isn't one and done unless it is an extremely high quantity, like in these chocolates. Usually it's a small dose, between 2 to 4 doses over time to weaken the subject, the other person, and then finally, while you're, you know, the abusive husband's soon to be ex wife writing out his last will and testament and ensuring that you get his property, um, and taking care of him by feeding him more arsenic, you have plenty of time to sign the estate over to yourself. That's usually how it was done. In this case, it was a one and done. So there was a lot of arsenic in those chocolates. And I think it was in her case that one of the things that tipped them off that it was the chocolate before they looked into it was um, the fact that they were homemade. They
Huh.
seemed to somebody just said it may have been the other one, but I think it was in this case that it was like somebody looked at them and were like, "Oh, that looks homemade," and then they found out the chocolate, the poison was in the filling. Um, and Mary, thinking that they were from her friend, innocently gave them to her sister Ida, her daughter, her niece, and a couple of neighborhood children. But only Mary and her sister Ida were the ones who died. I don't think anybody else died from it. Um, so far as I know, they may have. Yeah. Oh, also, it was her handwriting analysis that linked the poison penmanship back to Cordelia Botkin, along with the chocolates. Um, so this case, it's another one, became an absolute circus. Uh, Sensationalist news really took off, probably here in America with that case, although there may have been others. I'm sure there were at the time. And more than 500 people were turned away from the courthouse at the closing arguments of this case. But meanwhile, while it was going on, the San Francisco Examiner set up a bulletin board outside of the courtroom, posting summaries of the trial's progress. She was convicted of first-degree murder on December 31st of 1898 and sentenced to life in prison. It was in August that she had poisoned Mary Dunnings. Uh,
So why not
yeah.
execution?
Hmm?
I said, why not execution?
That I don't know. I feel like in the case of Christiana Edmonds, at first they wanted to execute her, but then they deemed that she was during an examination that she was mentally unstable, and that may have been the case with uh, Cordelia Botkin too.
Huh.
Um, yeah. So she did die in prison on March 7th of 1910. Yeah.
So she lived a good long life in the loony bin.
Yeah, which was exactly where she belonged. So yeah, that's what professional poisoners do on Valentine's Day, or at least serial killers. We send people innocent boxes of chocolates and uh love letters to our ex lovers. I'm not ours, me specifically, just other people. I don't do that.
Yeah. Learn from past mistakes so you don't get caught.
Yeah, just make it other people's problem. Make it the chocolatier poor guy's problem. Candyman,
Yeah.
sugar daddy. It's all his fault. Yeah,
Sugar daddy of the village.
Maybe Madame Datura does that, but Renee Fleury does not. I'm just saying.
Just saying.
FBI, don't come after me. They're probably watching my search history. Probably the CIA's watch list or something. I don't know.
Maybe don't watch any serial killer documentaries or shows.
I
That
mean,
might.
I don't really watch those things because I read enough about it. This whole book here is like full of it, and it says a manual of poisonous plants, and it's exactly what it is. And arsenic,
All
which is
right.
a mineral, and a metal, and a metal, and a plant.
Yeah. Just watch some more more wholesome Hallmarky stuff on your spare time.
right? I watch stuff about like ancient mysteries usually. Since
Hey, it's a
yeah,
great thing to do. Okay, so you also mentioned in the Victorian, so speaking of the Victorian era, earlier that there was um, a poisonous plant that was a symbol of love at the time.
it was actually. So the Victorians loved their flowers, and that's a whole other talk that I've done before about the secret Victorian era flower language. And they even had dictionaries printed on the stuff, and each flower, plant, herb, etc., even fruits, had a specific meaning attached to them. But in particular, my favorite one, since we are talking about such things, is this. This is beautiful Nerium oleander. This is my small oleander tree. Oh, look, she's getting some buds there. Um, some new growth, actually. That's where the no, yeah, that all right. That one's buds. These are the old ones. Anyway, this is my little small Nerium oleander. Um, and Nerium oleander is native to the Mediterranean and like Saudi Arabia, over that area, way over there. And there's a fairly wide range in that particular corner of the globe. And it was renowned in Greek folklore, ancient Greek folklore, and it gets its name, Nerium, Neros, meaning by the water. It likes to grow by the water. And Oleander from a Greek tragedy in which Lady Love herself is in love with a young man named Leander, and he goes to bring her flowers, oleander flowers, one night. She lives on an island. He swims out to her, never makes it. He drowns. And all she finds the next morning are the oleander flowers at the water's edge and goes around crying, "Oh, Leander, oh, Leander." And so during the Victorian age, they were well aware of this flower. It was used in arrangements. It grew and it grows very well down south. There was a lot of oleander poisoning, by the way, in 19th century Charleston. The disenchanted Victorian housewives of Charleston, South Carolina. And they saw this plant, these pretty flowers, as a symbol of cautionary love and romance and the complexities involved with love. Um, a cautionary tale, because while it is very beautiful, it is also extremely deadly, even to the touch. I am wearing gloves. A little bit of touching do anything, but certainly don't put any part of it in your mouth because a tiny bit is enough to do you in pretty
Right.
quick. And because it is a botanical poison, it's not pretty. Um,
I'll make sure just not to touch it, period.
yeah, I love her though. She's very pretty. This one's name is Locusta. Not all of my plants have names, but she's named Locusta after Rome's imperial poisoner under Emperor Nero, a woman after my own heart. Um, maybe.
Yeah. Now,
Well,
speaking of Mediterranean, let's go a little further east. And there was this small group of ladies uh, in the land of Kama Sutra that you were also interested in talking about.
yes, I will talk about them all very kind of briefly. Also, the history of poisoning and these plants, it definitely goes much further back than the Victorian era, such as what we're talking about now.
It
Um,
was still woman's work.
it was because in this case, these pretty young things were known as the Vishakanya, which is Sanskrit for poison girls. And I don't have to leave anything to the imagination because I'm going to tell you. Um, they were reportedly under the service of first Maurya Emperor Chandragupta of 300 BCE at as his covert assassins. So these young ladies were raised from an early age and fed small doses of poison to make them not only immune, but to make them into living weapons. So they were they were professional assassins, but they were also courtesans and sex workers, and they would be sent out into the city and to attract the attention of whoever the emperor didn't like, I suppose, uh, court them and do them in. Uh, it was written about in the Artha Shastra, a text on how to run an empire, an Indian text about how to run an empire. Spies were written as being important in any empire, especially those who were beautiful women, because who can resist a beautiful woman? Women are always welcome, particularly beautiful women, and they're so unassuming. Uh, and it was also written about in Indian plays, such as the Muradak, uh, Mudra Rakshasa, which describes the forming of the Maurya Empire under Chandragupta. They became a trope appearing in other ancient Indian literature, legends, and later on in medieval Europe. And they're actually they were written about by Aristotle in a letter to his pupil Alexander the Great, saying, "Don't sleep with any woman while you're over there," because Aristotle had such an encounter, and he almost didn't make it out alive, and said that the any bodily fluids from these women were enough to make your penis shrivel up like a ripe fruit and fall off or something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Just
They were
in the
chosen.
last.
No, but they were chosen to be Vishnu Kanya. It wasn't just anyone. They were chosen by astrology, and Vedic astrology was and still is very important to Indian culture. Um, they're big on palm reading over there in India, and they were uh, um, oh, and in the roots of Ayurveda, uh, selections from the Sanskrit and medieval writings, a warning is written. I'm sorry, that's where this is where that comes from the Ayurvedic writings of India uh, itself. It's like, if she touches you, her sweat can kill. If you make love to her, your penis drops off like a ripe fruit from its stalk. Nice.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So I mean, ancient India was well versed in poisonous plants. Of course, it's a very ancient culture. It goes way back, way past Hinduism. But speaking of Hinduism, we were talking about some ancient folklore. One of the stories I would like to mention um, is as I'm practicing Hindu, got my statue of Lord Shiva up there, a Shavist. So I am very familiar with his mythology, his stories, and I'm particularly fond of the stories involving Lord Shiva and his wife, goddess Parvati. They represent male and female, the heavens and the earth, right? Divine feminine and masculine. But like in any good marriage, they're always butting heads. And one day they're walking together and doing whatever it is that deities do, and she is taken by the beauty of the natural world around her and admiring all that she sees. And Shiva snaps at her. He's like, "What are you doing? Get back to work," pretty much. And she's like, "No." And at that point, she'd had enough of his shit because that was the last straw. And she was like, "You know what? I'm out. Bye." And she disappears from his side. She just leaves his ass. She leaves him in a number of different other stories too, to teach him a lesson. So even gods don't get along. Um, and Shiva then realizes what he did and feels very bad about that, right? He's like, "Oh my God, Parvati, please come back. I have nothing without you." But it was too late. He was like, "No, I'm not coming back. We're done." And so Shiva, having nothing left to live for, eats a datura flower, which interestingly enough are native to North America. Um,
Oh,
Most of them are, but they're in the Vedic texts. And datura kala means black datura. I have some branches over there. The stems are black. Kala means black. Kali means black feminine, so Kali, goddess Kali, the black one. Um, that one may be native to India. It's been around all over the world for so long that we don't know. But anyway, it's just interesting that most of the species are native to North America. But Shiva eats the datura flower and he drops dead because they're very poisonous. I have one right here, little ones, little baby daturas. My name is Madame Datura, for a reason. It's one of my favorite flowers. Highly medicinal, also very poisonous. And so the flower sprouts from his chest and he dies. So if it can kill Lord Shiva, the supreme Hindu deity of destruction and transformation, it can kill you. So maybe don't fuck around with the Torah because you'll find out. Um, yeah. Oh, it looks like this. The flower. I have a little um laser cut sign. This is the Torah stramonium, and that's the flower. It's also called a trumpet flower, angel trumpet, devil
Danger,
trumpet.
stay away, flower.
Yes. It is incredibly healing though, and it blooms at night. It's called moonflower. And so it also has that association with Lord Shiva, and he's got the crescent moon and the introspection, and a link with the divine feminine, but also with the divine masculine. Um, and when it sprouted from his chest, it became his sacred flower. And Lord Shiva loves flowers, particularly white ones, because of the Torah. Um, so for him to have a special sacred flower is something. So that's pretty cool. Since we are talking about Hinduism, I wanted to bring up that story. Um, it certainly illustrates just how toxic these plants can be. But again, that one in particular is actually very healing. It's not like oleander where just don't do it. Datura, absolutely use caution. It is absolutely deadly, but I do make a salve out of it for topical use only, and
Never
it's very
ingest.
never ingest, but it can be extremely medicinally healing. Um, Again, interestingly enough, because Shiva is a god of healing as well. So that those destructive properties of him, right, can also be transformed into healing. So it mirrors with the flower and all that. So poisonous plants have a fascinating place in folklore, and in real real folk. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but I'm saying like real folk, like human beings, um, in a not so distant past. And stuff like this definitely continues to this day. We just maybe don't hear about it as much because there's so many other atrocious things going on in the world currently and at all times.
Yeah. Well, but it's neat though that
It
we do know a little bit about poison and its place in history.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Renee, before I go lay down,
Chocolate, anyone?
chocolate,
Whitman's.
I will thank you again for coming on once more to talk about more poisonous stuff.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your chocolates.
Oh, I will. I love chocolate.
Me too. It really, like, researching what I do, it's made me a lot more cautious.
With everything.
Yeah, like I was researching this and I really wanted chocolate, and then I went and I bought this, and it was like, I don't want to eat these anymore.
Ruined your appetite.
Right? Like, what if it gave me the appetite for chocolate, and then when I bought them, I was like, no.
You need to be careful. All right,
Yeah.
well, thank you again, Renee.
Thank you for having me on.